Welcome to Got It, the filmmaking podcast that's got your back.
My name is Emilio Miguel Torres.
My name is Toby Romero.
And my name is Maggie Berry. So, Toby and Emilio, can you guys tell who you are and how you guys know each other?
Yeah, this is a first episode, so just gonna give introductions. Thank you, Maggie. I'll go first. So my name is Emilio Miguel Torres. I'm a young freelance film director, filmmaker, currently based out of Seattle, Washington. I went to NYU Film School, graduated this spring from NYU Film School, and I'm currently running a production company called Taurus Productions that creates, a variety of different content for clients in the Pacific Northwest. So that's my little spiel.
Yeah, I mean, I am still going to NYU. I am going to be going into my senior year this fall. With COVID and everything, I delayed my graduation a little bit longer so I could take in-person camera classes because I'm going down the cinematography track. So I'm taking a lot of camera classes this coming semester in person, which is great. And during the last few years, I've also kind of stayed busy doing freelance productions on the side. I'm currently doing a few music videos. I'm based out of Los Angeles during the summers, and then obviously New York City for NYU during the school year. And this summer, I'm finishing my fourth year with Warner Brothers. I had a 4-year program with them, so I kind of got the kind of corporate side of filmmaking. But I'm still really interested in more of the freelance side, and ideally, the dream is to work as a freelance cinematographer.
Phenomenal.
What about you, Maggie? Tell us a little about you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm an actress from Seattle, and I'm currently going to Arizona State University to study musical theater. But when COVID hit, I decided I wanted to take up filmmaking with Emilio and start working with him through his production company, Taurus Productions. So I work as a project manager for that. And Emilio and I have been collaborators this past year and a half, just as Toby and Emilio have been collaborators before on different projects. If you guys want to elaborate on that.
Yeah, sure. So Toby and I have been friends since freshman year of NYU. We met in fall of 2018 when we went to New York. And the story of how we met is pretty funny.
It's great.
Because it was welcome week at NYU. And this is right before Mo Bamba like blew up. Like this was like they had a Sheck West concert at NYU right before Mo Bamba, the song blew up. And I went, and I didn't have any friends at the time. And I remember at this concert, I saw this tall ass dude like going crazy in the mosh pit. And I was like, who the hell is that guy? Looks fun. I want to be friends with him. Flashback like a few days later, and I'm in like one of the bigger freshman film lectures, and I see him, and like I did not know if he was a film student or what, because the concert was just for like any Tisch student. But yeah, so basically I was like, all right, I'm gonna become his friend. So I willed it to happen. I was like, that's the cool guy I saw at the concert. I'm just gonna become friends with him. And so yeah, we just started talking. And then pretty early on, Toby, I'd say we kind of connected just because we had similar interests.
Yeah, I mean, for sure.
Yeah, and we both were super in, especially during that time, into like kind of like hip hop and streetwear culture and like music videos. And so pretty quickly we bonded over, a similar appreciation for different things like, ASAP Mob and Brockhampton and Tyler the Creator, and sort of gosh, what's the I'm blanking. What's the name of the like the collective that did the skate collective that did like the film? Do you know what I'm talking about, Toby?
Oh, Illegal Civ.
Yeah, we both appreciate Illegal Civ's content. Yeah. And so the first kind of major project we worked on was this thing called Ultrawave, which do you want to tell them a little about Ultrawave, Toby?
Sure. So I think, this was after me and Emilio, we're pretty close friends. And I was like, dude, I've been watching these Jake Paul vlogs, and I think we need a team 10, but for NYU and filmmaking. I think it would be so great. And then Emilio like right away was like, amazing, let's do it. So then me and him kind of founded this collective called Ultrawave, and we, reached out to a few of our friends and a few mutual friends. And we had like this team of eight people. And it was a little kind of last minute in terms of like getting videos out, and we had this ambition of getting at least one upload out a week, which didn't necessarily pan out, but it gave us a nice opportunity to kind of go through the YouTube workflow. And Emilio's got an insane editing turnaround, so we would shoot a music video. I think we shot one in like Queens, or I don't even know where we shot the Chief Trip music video, but we would shoot it like, and we would get we'd wrap at like 10-11 p.m. We'd take the subway back, and then when I woke up in the morning, we'd have the music video uploaded.
No way.
I was like, what? So
Yeah.
and then Amelia would go to bed for a few hours, then meet me. We had a lot of classes together, and meet me at that next class. And I was like, how is this dude operating? He's got 3, 4, 5 hours of sleep at night maximum, and I'm like, I'm very, I love to get like 10, 11 hours of sleep. So it was definitely something that I was totally blown away with. But I mean, it worked so well. Like, I loved holding the camera and framing up the shots, working with the lighting, and Emilio was perfect with working with the talent. And a lot of the stuff we did was also kind of documentary based. Like, we would go out and talk to people in Washington Square Park, which is kind of like the park that surrounds NYU. Right. And we went out like on a snow day, which was fun. And we kind of did all these like little small things. And it never really turned out to be anything bigger. And I think we did like make the newspaper for NYU and all that, and it was definitely heading towards like a promising path. And then COVID hit, and a lot of our projects that we had planned out kind of fell through, and we all kind of returned back home. So then it took a pause, and then Emilio started Torres Productions. So it was definitely a nice kind of like beginning into our relationship and our craft, because immediately I had an idea, and Emilio was like, let's do it. And I think that's kind of our relationship now, is like Emilio has an idea, and I'm like, let's do it. There's no second guessing, there's no hesitation.
Well, I think one thing about Ultrawave that like I didn't really realize until maybe like recently in hindsight, like why it was so good for us, is that like, for anyone who's listening, whether you want to go to film school or you think you may want to go to film school, pretty much like any film school you go to, it's pretty common that the first year of your program, you don't actually shoot that much. A lot of first years in different film school programs are about learning the fundamentals, or learning about film history, or like getting everybody on the same page, because people go to film school with different levels of experience. And so because of that, like we did not have that many opportunities in the classroom to be shooting stuff. But like Toby and I as people just like love to create things and like make something, put it out there, see people react to it, and just love that process. And so I think like it was almost like we created Ultrawave out of necessity to create. And like you said, even though Ultrawave didn't pan out to anything, it's kind of like ever since I went to film school, I've just always been in the rhythm of like idea, execute, release it. And I've just always been in that rhythm. And I think that muscle of like, here's an idea, let's make it, let's put it out there. Like that's a muscle you have to practice. And like basically since I've been 18 years old, I've been doing that nonstop. And so like now it makes me like, I work on a lot of different projects. So I'm constantly putting stuff out. And it's like, I think Ultrawave was a good way to sort of warm up to that, because it was like projects on our own terms, and they were short, and they were kind of like rough around the edges, like purposely. So I think in general, I mean, and I think that's something that helps us stand out. Even when sometimes when I think about peers of ours who maybe struggle, it's like, sometimes it's important just to make something, even if it's not great, even if like no one sees it, just working that muscle of like make something, put it out there, even if it sucks, because you're going to be a better filmmaker.
Yeah, I think you two work really well in that way, because you guys have a nice balance of maybe like perfectionism and let's just make something. And it's good to see you guys work, because you guys balance each other a little bit, I think.
Yeah, totally. I think I know it's great. I know. I think like our relationship, as we continue to work on projects and stuff, we're just building more and more chemistry. And like it's so much fun to do projects with Emilio, because I sometimes, we'll go through, some issues or troubleshooting on set, and we both kind of look at each other sometimes and we have the exact same idea and we don't even say anything, we just go and do it. And that's a really good relationship to have, as collaborators and as filmmakers, and like a DP director kind of duo. It really speeds kind of the time of or on set, and the synergy you have. But yeah, and I mean it's been so fun, and I'm excited for the future.
Yeah. So you guys did Ultra Wave and you guys worked together a lot at NYU, but recently this past summer, well, all three of us went to Alaska to film The Ladder. So maybe we could talk a little bit about that and that
Yeah, so
little experience we had.
I think the best way to kind of talk about The Ladder before we get to the Alaska part is to kind of
Yeah.
wind back the clock a little bit, because so for context again, Maggie, who's here with us, not only is she the project manager of my production company, she's also my girlfriend. And well, we actually met back in summer 2018 because like she said, she's a musical theater actress. I was on crew. I was doing projections for this production of Little Mermaid that she was in, and we started dating. And we dated through like my first 2 years of film school and kind of like did our own crafts separately. But obviously, like Maggie said earlier, when COVID happened, we both were stuck back here in Seattle, and we're like, okay, how do we navigate this? And so I started doing freelancing, and purely out of necessity at first, I just needed an extra pair of hands. But then very quickly, Maggie learned a lot. And actually, like, Maggie's a sick colorist and gotten pretty good at like lighting. Even today, like I was busy, and we were shooting something for a client, and she basically like lit the entire project herself. So she's learned a ton this past year. But the reason why I'm bringing this up is because basically Maggie, and Toby, if we really think of the grand scheme of things, were part of The Ladder since the beginning, because I wanted to write The Ladder, which is the newest short film that I shot in 2019, right after we wrapped Wannabe, which was another short film Toby and I shot, and we can talk about it on a future episode. But right after we right after we wrapped that short film, I really wanted to just write another one. And so I remember Maggie and I talked right after that, and we made that film, which Maggie acted in. And I came with the idea for The Ladder, which is basically a film about this aging Alaskan fisherman, who gets approached by this sci-fi biotechnology company, who has created this procedure called Actolife, which will allow an individual to restart their life if they want to by transplanting their brain into a synthetic younger body. And so basically this company comes to Arthur and is like, hey, let's do this. And the short film's about whether or not he would do that, and kind of the themes about family and changing family dynamics, and what's the purpose of life. All those types of themes are part of the film. And so we wrote that back in 2019. And like my first draft of it, I wrote for a class I was in with Toby. So Toby, do you want to talk a little bit about maybe the
You keep
workshopping?
saying we, but you definitely wrote that. So don't give me any credit.
Well,
for that.
I mean, I do think, I'm bringing it up because Toby and I, like I said, we did a lot of class together. In fall 2019, we did a writing class together. And so I was just curious, Toby, if you could talk about the process of working on The Ladder in that class, because I would send you guys drafts and you guys would help me workshop
That's
it.
true. That's true. It's a collaborative thing.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, no. So we were in a class called Writing the Short with Mark Arowitz, I think is the
Mark
professor's
Arowitz,
name.
yeah.
Mark Arowitz, who's awesome. And the NYU classes, the writing classes at least, are pretty small for the workshop classes. So I think we were maybe 11, 12 people, all in one room, and we knew half the class coming into it too. So we were very kind of close knit, kind of group. But yeah, and so Emilio kind of starts coming up with this idea and workshopping it in class, and we only are meeting once a week to workshop the scripts. So on his downtime, we roommated together sophomore year. So this was our sophomore year at NYU, and we lived in the same room. And then our two suite mates, Taylor and Sebastian, are also our close friends. We're all kind of us four, all in film, all wanting to either write, direct, be a cinematographer, just kind of immersed in everything. And a lot of the time we would kind of run ideas by each other, run scripts by each other, and that sort of thing. So Emilio kind of came up with this script and started workshopping it both in class and in our dorm room, like late at night, like we would, be watching a movie, and then like suddenly like Amelia would press pause and be like, oh my God, I just had this breakthrough for the script. Let me like pitch this idea to you. So there's a lot of free flow, kind of like, I think it was a very creative room, don't you think? Like we had a lot of kind of
601
like,
was legendary.
yeah, it was room 601. But yeah, so I mean, it was, just a good environment. There was a lot of ambiance to the room. Sebastian would always bring different like stuff
Yeah.
into the decorating, really just kind of weird, college room vibes. But the environment was so like progressive in the sense that we were able to run ideas off each other and really kind of help each other workshop through scripts and troubleshooting. And a lot of the time we get a lot of critique from Mark and from the class on Emilio's script, and then he would come back to with me, and we would go back to the dorm and we'd start talking about those issues, because usually we during class everyone has to go through their scripts. We don't really have a lot of time to actually work through the critique. You just kind of get the critique and then go home and figure it out on your own. So it was nice to have that support system of me, Taylor, and Sebastian, and Emilio all kind of putting our heads together. I mean, obviously Emilio did the heavy lifting, it's his story, but we were there to kind of offer some creative critique and advice when need be. And I mean, I think we all kind of balance each other out pretty well, because we all have different kind of tastes and styles and perspectives and experiences.
And I think something you're kind of talking about, Toby, which I think is kind of a learning moment for anyone who's listening, would if you are getting into writing screenplays or want to learn more about writing screenplays, like I think one of the biggest things that you have to accept when you're a screenwriter, or really any writer, but a screenwriter especially, is that like you can't write a script like on your own. Like the process of writing is rewriting, hearing your script get read by people, getting feedback, making sure your message is coming across. And so I think a big thing for me, especially sophomore year, was just having that community to, and I think the script was better because, the like I said, the previous short that we had done, Wannabe, I did a little bit of workshopping, but it was pretty much just like you're like, oh yeah, this is it, but there was something about like doing it in a classroom setting and doing it with people that I trusted that like helped elevate the script. And I think another thing about The Ladder, for those you don't know, the film takes place, like I said, it's about Alaska fishermen. So it takes place in Ketchikan, Alaska, which is my hometown. And so the film, I would say, is a very Ketchikan story. And so it was a very interesting experience for me because in many ways, I felt like it was a unique story that only I could tell. But it also had to make sure it was resonating for all audiences. So I think a big growing moment for me as a filmmaker and a writer was doing that process and kind of humbling myself and knowing like, okay, either the script is working or it's not working. It's not like, oh, it's my script and whatever. But long story short, we write the script, and the original plan was we're going to produce it in May of 2020. And so I wrote it in the fall of 2019. I was going to shoot it in May 2020. And that original film had no attachment to NYU. Originally, my idea was I wanted to direct a short the summer after my freshman year and after my sophomore year, because you don't really get to shoot a proper short film your freshman and sophomore year at NYU. You get to your junior and senior year. So I figured, well, I might as well do one in the summers. So then when I graduate, I have 4 short films I could be proud of. That was the original plan before the pandemic happened. But yeah, we're going to shoot in May, and Toby and I were doing a lot of prep for that back then. Toby, you want to talk a little bit about maybe the type of prep we were doing in spring 2020 before COVID-19 happened?
Yeah, no, I mean, we were getting everything kind of dialed and ready. And, as the cinematographer, I was starting to pull references, looking at cameras, looking at the different types of cameras, the different types of lenses, how they look, and the feel of all of them on different films. And, a big thing that the cinematographer and the director do together is kind of watch films and talk about stylistically what they like, what they don't like, visually what they're trying to represent. And me and Emilio, being very fortunate that we lived together, we once or twice a week would sit down and watch a movie and then kind of discuss it and talk about the visual references and how we wanted to incorporate those ideas into The Ladder. And then I created a mood board and just pulled a bunch of still images. I think some of the bigger references for The Ladder were Manchester by the Sea. Obviously the boat and the fishing had a really nice reference, but on top of that, it was just a very kind of like cold and grunge, and there was a texture to it that I really liked. And I mean, a lot of the references I pulled were we're all shot on an Alexa, which we didn't end up getting to use. And deep down in the back of my head, I was like, there's no way we can use an Alexa. But I think we still, like, in terms of equipment, made it work. And I'm still super happy with kind of the end result. And I think that's also a good lesson, is as a cinematographer and as someone who loves talking tech and equipment, I always want the newest and best thing for every new shoot. And I mean, Amelia, we can definitely kind of agree on this point that when you are limited in terms of your budget or the resources that you have at your disposal, it allows for you to get more creative and
Right.
to start, like using, your limitations as an opportunity for happy accidents, and exploring other ways to kind of, again, flex that muscle of creating and filmmaking.
Yeah, I mean, for listeners, if you're gonna listen to future episodes, I'm sure you're gonna hear me reference this guy a lot. But a big mentor and teacher for Toby and I is his professor in NYU named Ulrich Brown, and I credit a lot of my filmmaking knowledge to that man. But one thing he always taught us is, like, limitations make you a better filmmaker. And one thing he always talked about is that, like, 90% of filmmakers, if you give them any budget, like of any budget level, they're going to say, like, that's not enough, because they're always thinking, well, like, what they can't do or what they should do. But, like, you can always make a great film, because, like, it doesn't matter whether you're shooting an iPhone or whether you're shooting on Alexa. Like Toby said, it's all comes down to story, and oftentimes limitations helps you make a better story than, like, having anything. I mean, again, one time we had a guest speaker in one of my classes who directed, like, a lot of big budget, Hollywood films. And she was talking about how, like, the hardest thing was going from the indie world to the Hollywood world, because suddenly, like, if you can do anything, it's, like, harder to like tell a good story than if you, like, she's like, if you're shooting an indie film, you have, like, and you go to, like, this location and you only have the location for 1 hour, there's only one place you can afford to put the camera down and, like, get the scene right. But then if you're, like, on a Marvel movie, you put the camera anywhere, it gets really tough. But anyway, I'll get back to the main thing. So getting ready, getting prepped, we're gonna do the ladder. And originally Toby and I were gonna do the ladder really shoestring. Like, I was probably going to spend a few hundred of my own dollars just to get him up to catch a can, shoot it on Toby's Sony, maybe rent a couple of, like, Sigma lenses, which aren't even that great. And, like, I thought, like, okay, that's going to be it. But then, COVID happened. And so I moved home back to Maggie. And I don't know, I was pretty, maybe you can speak to this, Maggie, but I was pretty depressed when the ladder couldn't happen. And I don't know, I kind of, like, tabled the ladder for a while. And I don't know when it kind of happened for me that I decided to, like, pick it back up again.
Yeah, I think, like, sometime in the fall you came to me or something and you're like, I think I want to do this. Like, I think I'm just going to do it next summer. And it was just kind of you just, like, said an idea and then made it happen. But yeah, when the latter couldn't happen, I think all of us were very sad for you, because we were all looking forward to it and we knew that you were too.
But ultimately, I think it probably was a good thing, because
Oh my gosh, yeah.
because fast forward, what happens is, fall happens, and I was doing school virtually and doing a couple of projects through my production company. And I can go more in detail, in a future episode about how my production company works and how I freelance and stuff. But in spring of this past year, 2021, like Maggie said, I decided to do it fall. In spring, I kind of reached out to I remember, I think it was like January, I reached out to Toby. I was like, okay, we're going to do this again, but this time we're going to crowdfund. Because I don't know why, but I got it in my head that I was pretty confident I could raise like $15,000 for it, which is crazy.
Yeah,
like,
I think that you had, in your mind, you had never wanted to crowdfund until your final project at NYU, because you've seen all of our peers kind of crowdfunding smaller projects, and you're like, well, you don't want to exhaust your resources too early. So that's one of the big kind of takeaways for you, is that I want to wait till my final NYU film to crowdfund, and then kind of milk all the resources I have, so people don't think, they don't see, like, every single year, I'm asking for your money, donate money to my short film, my new short film. But you, after doing your intermediate and landing on the ladder, I think you kind of wanted to like, actually fully send it and be like, this is kind of my hopefully be one of my last short films that'll jumpstart my career and as a feature film director.
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess that's true. I mean, for those who don't know, Toby said intermediate. Intermediate is normally the junior level, like short film production you do at NYU, but I graduated in 3 years, so my intermediate was basically my final NYU project, like as a student, and then the latter would be my first project, like after graduating. So
You
Toby's
also
right.
placed your crowdfunding at like a very convenient time in your life.
Yeah.
It was during your 21st birthday, your graduation, and it was your final film. So you
Yeah.
kind of milked that.
Yeah, I definitely, the stars aligned for me, and I got very lucky because I don't want someone to hear this and be like, well, I tried crowdfunding and it didn't work out for me, so whatever. Like, and truthfully, like, I did not have like some angel donor who like donated a lot of the budget. Like, truly, it was a lot of just like community building and hard work. And I can definitely go more into detail about how the crowdfunding, why I think we were successful. But basically, I decided, yeah, we're gonna do the latter again. I tightened up the script. I brought together a team. I found a producer who also went to NYU named Alexandria Hellman, and she helped me a lot with the crowdfunding campaign. At this point, Maggie had been working with me for a year on client project, the Taurus Productions. So she was well versed in like how to make a film happen. And I just directed my intermediate film, which I was pretty proud of. And so I was like, okay, let's do this thing. And so I set my goal for $15,500. And I kind of broke down the budget of what I think we'd need. And what was really excited about that budget is that budget would let us make the movie for how I wanted to. And then also I got to pay all the cast and crew, which was super important to me. And so we made a crowdfunding campaign and we used Seed and Spark, which I think is the best crowdfunding website. And anyway, we launched it. In a day, we raised more than half of our goal. And then in 10 days, we raised $15,550. And then we ended up with like almost $17,000 by the end of the month that we did the crowdfunding campaign. And it was hard work, and but it worked out. And like you said, it was kind of like the stars aligned. I was very thoughtful about how I did it. And I also think, like I said earlier, this was a project about Ketchikan, and Ketchikan's an amazing community. And I'm sure Toby can talk about it once we get to production. It's pretty incredible, like how supportive and amazing everyone in Ketchikan is. And they're very supportive of the arts. So a lot of our crowdfunding campaign came from people in Ketchikan who like saw me grow up and knew that I wanted to be a filmmaker when I was a kid, and decided to contribute. So anyway, we hit our goal, and then we started prep on doing the short film for real, but with the budget. I don't know, Maggie or Toby, you guys want to talk about from your perspective, like what prep was like kind of that month leading up to July, like June, because we had like weekly production meetings.
Yeah. For me, like I was the assistant director. So a lot of it was Emilio and I have been talking about the ladder a lot throughout the whole process, from him beginning to write it 2 years ago through all the way through now. So I felt like I was really in his brain when it came to making this film, which was, I think, very helpful for both of us. But that for me, that just meant that I was assisting him in like whatever logistical ways, because I kind of acted as a producer as well, in helping him get props and
Definitely.
coordinating with people and doing the script breakdown and stuff. So that was fun. We also did like weekly production meetings with the rest of the cast and crew, which is also really helpful to get everybody on the same page. I was like nervous before that because I didn't know like anybody going to Ketchikan or any of your crew really, but I think that really was a really beneficial thing for me to get to meet everybody through those meetings and stuff.
So yeah, June was a very fun time because summer just started, and Maggie, I had actually, kind of hired her as an actual, contracted worker for my production company for the summer instead of her getting a part-time job. And I'm gonna say that again, Toby, edit that out. So June was a very fun time because Maggie and I were working together on Taurus Productions. Originally, she was going to get a part-time job, but I basically said, hey, don't get a part-time job. Let me pay you to work on films with me. And that's what she's been doing this summer. This week is actually her last week working on films with me before she goes to Arizona, which is, by the way, in a future episode, Maggie will be in Arizona. But anyway, that month was very fun for me because we had the budget to make the movie happen, and I started prepping the logistics of it. And it was a very stressful time, but it was also a very fun time because I was, focused on making my movie. But then completely separately, I booked a pretty important job, and I can talk about this in a future episode, but for my production company, I booked a pretty big job for me. And the funds from that job, along with us going over a budget on the ladder, kind of made the stars aligned, where I realized, I'm doing my production company for the foreseeable future and working on projects in Seattle and trying to level up as a director and a filmmaker. And so it would benefit me to have like a, quality cinema camera. And originally I was going to rent a cinema camera for the ladder, and it was going to cost like $1,000 to rent it for a week. And I was just thinking, like, why would I spend $1,000 to rent this camera for a week when, like, just for a few more $1,000 I could own a camera? So I went ahead and jumped the gun, and in June I bought Canon's new cinema camera, the C70, which I love, and I think Toby can talk about it a little bit more. But I think it was fun because we had this new camera. I found a local rental place to rent gear from, and it was a very interesting time for Toby and I, because basically Toby and I hadn't worked on anything for an entire year, and then we decided to work on the ladder again. And so Toby and I were like doing virtual prep together. And I don't know, Toby, if you want to talk a little bit more about the process. We also had our friend Jackson and Taylor join the crew as gaffer and AC, and they were working with Toby virtually. And yeah, it was a brand new camera that Toby was going to shoot on. Lenses I don't think you've shot on before. So do you want to talk a little bit more about the cinematography prep for the ladder round 2?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I mean, when Emilio told me, he texted me a few weeks before we started shooting, like while we were gathering the equipment list, and I was working with him on what camera, what lenses and everything. He just sent me, "We are shooting on C70," and I was like, "What?" I was like, "What is it?" I didn't even hear the camera. Like, I was just like, "What's going on?" Like, so immediately, right, I Google Canon C70. And I've shot a few short films on the Canon C300 and like the Mark II and the Mark III, and I love that camera. And I think it's like probably kind of my go-to for like a mid-budget film. And so seeing the C70 kind of being that new iteration of those mid-level cinema cameras, I was like, okay, this is great. The one drawback I think technically for me was that it didn't shoot RAW. Which is not the biggest deal, because you still, it just kind of, again, we talked about limitations, and that just kind of puts a little bit more pressure on me, and makes me really keep a close eye out for exposure and white balance and all those technical terms on the camera, just to make sure everything's squared away, because if you're not shooting RAW, you don't have as much flexibility in post, which is fine. And I think I did a good job. I mean, I'll hear from whoever's coloring it in the next few months whether or not I dropped the ball on anything. But I mean,
the footage is great.
Yeah,
It looks horrible, Toby.
It's
really
awful.
bad.
We're not editing the film. It looks too bad.
Hey, so
it's
good.
canceled.
It's the best looking thing I've shot.
It's canceled.
But yeah, no, and I mean, I think my favorite part of the C70 was the internal NDs, and that's why I also like the C200 and C300, is the ability to have internal neutral density filters. For those who don't know, a neutral density filter is pretty much a filter that you can either put on a matte box or screw onto a lens, or internally for Canon, it pretty much cuts light evenly throughout the entire image. So the advantage to that is, when you're in a very sunny, bright day and you want to keep your iris, your aperture open, like say at like an f2, you can't necessarily do that because you're, at the lowest ISO possible. Or if you want to continue to shoot native ISO, which is like the ISO that the manufacturer recommends, then you're kind of forced. The next step in exposing is to then go to aperture and start adjusting that. So normally you'd have to shoot at like a 16 or a 22, which is really like darker to make the image exposed. Sorry if that doesn't make sense.
No, it makes sense. It's sunglasses for your camera.
Exactly.
Literally.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sunglasses
Well, the
for your
C70 has a lot of the cool tricks. Like this is actually a funny story. When this is jumping a little ahead of it to production, but something the C70 has is like, it has an internal auto stabilization. And it was pretty funny because we shot some handheld stuff on one of the days on set, and we were looking at the dailies. And for those who don't know, dailies is just basically when like you just take the raw footage and you watch it, after you've shot. And so we're watching the dailies, and I was like, this footage like looks weird. Like it looks like someone's like stabilized it. And at this point, I didn't know the C70 had auto stabilization. And so Taylor, Toby, and I were trying to figure it out. And then Taylor, who's our AC, he like Googled like C70 stabilization, and this video came up, and it was like the C70 has the best stabilization of like any camera. And we found out it was on, and so we had to turn that off because I didn't want it to look like digitally fixed. But that's just a funny story. An example of the C70 has a lot of like really cool tricks. And even now I've been shooting some client work after the ladder with it, and I'm still learning stuff that it does. And so I'm really happy with the purchase. But anyway, that's enough gear talk for this episode. So we get to so the whole Alaska adventure, pretty crazy. Obviously you, Toby and Maggie, you can feel free to jump at any point, but it starts off, we're going to shoot July 3rd to July 10th. And so it's a bit, like I said, a lot of planning, making schedules, making travel plans, budgeting things out, buying things, buying props, all the prep stuff. If you want to learn more about how we made it happen, check out my TikTok. I did a daily updates on the making of the film and pre-production.
Shameless self-plug.
But we got to Alaska July 3rd, and Toby flew from California to Seattle, and Seattle to Alaska. Maggie and I flew from Seattle to Alaska, and we had Jackson and Taylor fly from New York to Seattle to Alaska. And so we're staying at a house in Alaska. We landed on a Saturday night. We were shooting, our first day was on Monday, so we got to enjoy the weekend and prep, and we got to check out some of our locations ahead of time and talk about the film and things like that. And at this point we have a shot list.
That's actually a lie. When I flew in the day after everyone, and I pretty much got picked up from the airport, and we went straight to our first location.
Okay,
so
well,
I didn't have any downtime.
No.
I had to wake up and then super early, and then
Toby,
I had like a 7-hour layover, and then I
Toby,
landed in Alaska, and
that's a lie.
like, okay, let's go shoot some second unit stuff.
Toby's story sounds a little more accurate.
Okay, well, this is a double lie, okay? Because those shots we did get, but none of them were in the original schedule. Okay, so
okay,
it was like one of those things. Toby landed. I was like, "Hey, Toby, you and I are here," because I was expecting to come in on Sunday, and so the fact that both Toby and I came in on Saturday. Because for those who don't understand why I didn't know when we were going to land, is to make this movie happen. I took advantage of the fact that my mom works for Alaska Airlines, and we used some of her standby tickets, which basically means like you get on a flight if there's seats, but if there's not, like tough luck. And so we weren't exactly sure when everyone was going to get to Ketchikan, but I got to Ketchikan a day earlier than I thought I would. And so when Toby landed, I was like, okay, man, we're here a day early. The sun is perfect. Do you want to go get just some like landscape shots? And so these were very low stake shots. Toby's making it seem like I had him like do a 12-hour production day. We drove out to a beach and took some sunset shots. So
I think it was good, even though Toby was tired.
Yeah, I don't know if this was that difficult.
I got to work with the boys and Sarah, and it was nice to like get to know you guys before we had to go on set. So even though we were all exhausted,
yeah,
especially Toby, it was nice.
It's okay though. It's okay.
I'm just complaining. I mean, I don't like, I never turned down an opportunity to go shoot stuff, and I think a lot of the images we captured were really special, and it happened to be one of the clearer days there, which was great. So we got a nice sunset shot, and again, like both you were saying, it was a good warm up, because I guess if we want to start talking about the schedule, our first shooting day was an overnight.
Yeah. So okay, this is, and credit to Alexandria Hellman, one of our producers, who helped us build the schedule, because it was pretty crazy. Because we were like, we had to balance the fact that we could only travel and go to Ketchikan during this 1 week. So then we were working around our actors' schedules, the times that we had access to these locations, because we got all of our locations for free. And then also like just balancing it all was pretty tough. And somehow she created this schedule to make it all work. And also I have scenes in my movie that take place at night, And whenever you have a short film where you do night and day, like we wanted to do our film with like a proper like you know, film set protocol, and on a proper like union set, you need to have a 12-hour turnaround from when you wrap on one day to when you start on the next day. And when you're only shooting for 1 week and you have some night scenes, that's very tough, because if you do a night scene, you can't go to like, if you go from a 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. shoot, you can't start shooting the next day until 6 p.m. And if you have to do day stuff, it just gets very difficult. So you have to, be crazy. But we somehow figured it out. But our first night had to be an overnight, and then our second day was like a half day night / early evening, and then we're back on schedule. But anyway, yes, our first shoot was an overnight, and it was also like the whole thing was crazy. It was our most like emotionally tense scene, and our lead actress Heidi landed at 7:15 p.m. and her picture was up on her scene at 9 p.m. that night, and she was going and she shot till like 3 a.m. Doing like probably the most difficult scene of the movie. So credit to Heidi Poet, and credit to the whole crew. We had a lot of like first like people who are on a crew for the like on set for the first time for this type of project. We had our friends Megan, Sarah, Felix. They're all from Ketchikan, and it was kind of their first time on a set like this, I think. And so yeah, it was a lot of first timers. Our first night was very tough, but the rest of the days were smoother. I don't know, Maggie, Toby, what are your thoughts on like how the production went, and then also just like how it was being in Ketchikan?
Yeah. I mean, I think production went very smoothly. I will say I was a little worried of starting the kind of 5-day shooting, like very rigorous shooting schedule on an overnight, because I was worried, we weren't going to get adequate sleep and have enough kind of recharge time in between. Obviously, we still had those 12-hour
I wonder why we
turnarounds.
didn't get enough adequate sleep. It's almost like your director Toby told you to.
You are so petty. You are so
Okay,
petty.
I make a joke, but for listeners, I told the crew that Sunday night we should stay up super duper late, because then we would sleep during the day on Monday, and then when we went to our overnight on Monday, we'd be well rested. And it's 11 p.m. Sunday night.
It is not 11 p.m. Shut up.
It's like, okay, fine. It's midnight on
Midnight
Sunday.
30.
Midnight 30. I'm like, okay, guys, we're gonna try to stay up as late as we can, and then we're gonna rest all day. I look over, and Toby is asleep on the couch.
It's like, guys, I can't do this. I can't do this. And everybody's like yelling at him, trying to get him to wake up. I felt so bad for Toby. I was like, you guys stop bullying him. He needs to go to sleep.
It's okay though. We had plenty of energy drinks on set.
Everything worked out. We all, we relied a lot on energy drinks. I think our go-to was Bang Energy at the end of the trip. We had enough.
Sponsor got it, Bang.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, it was a lot of fun. And I think, again, there were a few like different things that, I had cold feet about, and, wasn't necessarily super on board with originally, but I think like while I was, again, I trust Emilio and I trust Maggie just because I've had such a good working relationship with both of them. So I coming into this was like, what, like, even though there's some things that, I'm a little worried about or something, I'm just going to trust the process. I'm going to go in. I trust that they've planned and thought everything through, and which they had. So it all worked out. We had our 5 days of shooting, and I got enough sleep every single day, which was great for me. And, being on set is, it's pretty labor intensive, especially if you're doing something. I mean, every role is labor intensive. You're either standing up, you're moving gear, you're doing a lot of things, and it's not just physically exhausting, it's also mentally exhausting because you're exercising your creative muscles. And so there was definitely a lot of concern for fatigue and burnout, but I think the entire crew did really well. And, again, like Amelia was saying, 3 of the crew members I didn't really know that well. I knew Sarah a little bit, but I didn't know Felix and I didn't know Megan. And we were a pretty small crew. Like, I guess you could call it a skeleton crew. We were like 9 people. So it was, at the end of it, we were all super close and all really, happy that we got this done. And I think that's on almost every film set is like, you're spending 12 hours with these people every day, and your work usually comes first, but again, you're all people and you all like to socialize and connect, and you're all working to, build this greater thing. And I think that's what's so special about filmmaking. And, it's just so awesome. And, Taylor and Jackson, I had already known Jackson was the gaffer. Emilio mentioned Taylor. Taylor was the first AC. Taylor was also our roommate sophomore year. So, you know, we all knew each other. Me, Taylor and Sebastian, sorry, not Sebastian, Jackson. Taylor and Jackson were really, you know, close to us. And then at the end of it, because it was kind of this New York Ketchikan blend of people. And I think, you know, originally, again, I had a little bit of cold feet on how the entire crew would interact and get to, you know, get along with each other, but it all worked out and everyone seemed like they were super happy. And, you know, we all had our first priority was always just getting the movie done. And I think as long as everyone kind of has that priority on set, you know, even the people that you don't necessarily get along with, you learn to kind of tolerate. That's not a great way to put it, but it's just like on set, you know, it's so important to have the right mentality. And I think that's what I'm trying to say is that, you know, it's good to keep an open mind. And if you don't necessarily agree with certain things, trust the process, trust the producers, trust the director, trust your superiors, your you know, everyone, because, you know, everyone's there to, you know, with the same goal of making a movie. And that's what's so special about it.
Yeah, I think that's actually, I think, a great place to kind of stop. I mean, there's a lot of things about the ladder that I'm sure Toby and I can go in even more in depth on in future episodes, but like that really summarizes it. I mean, that was a very quick overview of everything. There's a lot more we can talk about, but you know, we wrapped the film in July. Currently, we're in post-production, assembling our post-production team. I'm organizing a quick little second round of crowdfunding to help us cover, you know, wages for post-production. And Alexandria's actually just came on as editing the film, which I don't know if Toby even knows. So you just found out that, Toby. But yeah, in future episodes, we can go more in depth on the portions of the film. But I think, yeah, that's a good place to stop as far as the ladder goes.
Yeah. Well, before we go, do you guys watch any good movies this week? Any good TV shows? Any good
Toby?
visual media?
I'm gonna let Emilio start while I'm formulating.
Okay. So I have to pull up my my website here because I have to make sure I get this right. So I saw this film. It's not like rentable, so I had to buy it, but maybe other people will have better luck in finding it. But so this film I watched, it's called Golden Arm. It's a comedy. I think it came out in 2020, but like maybe like one of those pandemic releases that like didn't go on streaming until this year. But it's this comedy movie about these women who are super into like competitive arm wrestling. And like the film is shot like an 80s sort of like, I don't know, like almost like boxing movie, but it's about like these women who are arm wrestlers. And to me, I thought the movie was hilarious, and the cinematography was great. It was very obvious that a lot of the scenes were improvised, and so it was funny in that way. It's a great cast. It's directed by this director named Maureen, and I'm filming to mispronounce her last name, but I think it's Barucha. And she's kind of an up and coming comedy director and is doing a lot of different work. And I actually listened to her on another podcast for filmmaking called Just Shoot It that I listened to. And yeah, so I watched this movie this past week. Really great. Highly suggest it. If you just want something dumb but it's really fun and really great, watch it. It almost seems like you can watch it through Hulu. I don't know. Maybe you can find out. But yes, Golden Arm. Check it out.
I'll have the not so polished answer. I in the last week or two, I've seen two kind of memorable things. One, I saw the new Space Jam,
Woo!
which I, you know, from a legacy standpoint, from I guess just being a fan of the first one and being, you know, a basketball fan, and Emilio is also a basketball fan. I think that it was great that they could make a second one, and, you know, having LeBron James as the star was, you know, great for me because I'm from LA. I love the Lakers. You know, he's a current Laker. It was unfortunate that they didn't make the playoffs, you know, for the movie, but also for LeBron. I think there, you know, it was all right. And, you know, it's interesting because the story's a little bit different than the first one, and I think
you can just say it, bro. It's a bad movie. It's okay to say it.
It's not great. There's just
it's
a
terrible.
lot of, like, from cinematography standpoint, I think a lot of the close-ups on LeBron were shot with a very wide angle, like an 18 millimeter. And when you shoot on a really wide angle like that, it gets really kind of, you get a fisheye look. So LeBron's like kind of close-ups sometimes didn't look the most appealing. But the lighting was kind of just, I mean, I think visual effects were great, and that's what I'll kind of leave it at that for Space Jam. And then the second thing that I watched was this documentary on HBO Max called 100 Foot Wave. And I'm a surfer, I love to surf, and this is about big wave surfing. And beyond just big wave surfing, I've recommended this to a few of my friends to watch, and it's a documentary, but it's like a mini series, and they do such a good job of telling the story. It's about this spot in Portugal called Nazaré, and it's like pretty much the biggest wave there is. And this guy, McNamara, he is trying to, his goal is to ride a 100-foot wave, and it's just about him and his journey and coming to this foreign place. He's Hawaiian, and coming to Portugal, and all about that. And I think just as from a filmmaker standpoint, I started really watching a lot more documentaries and appreciating them. I kind of at first had cold feet about documentaries because they're a little bit more bland, in the sense that there's not, this was what I thought previously, that there wasn't like as much dramatization as a narrative film. But I've come to really understand and appreciate documentaries, and using a documentary as a storyline and then creating dramatization around it. And I think 100 Foot Wave really does a good job of that.
Does Warner Brothers like send you a check if you suggest movies that are on HBO Max? Like, are you
No,
getting like
I was just gonna put it in there. I was just gonna put it in there that it is on HBO Max, which is a great streaming platform.
the Warner Brothers overlords
we won't talk about the marketing and the name. It's not the best, but it does. I will tell you right now, if you're a filmmaker and you like watching movies, HBO Max is great, and I'm not getting paid to say this.
It's become my favorite streaming service as well.
They have the biggest library. If you look at films anywhere from 2010 to maybe 1980, almost every blockbuster hit was from Warner Brothers. So if you love movies in that time period and you want to watch them for free streaming, I mean, you have to pay your monthly fee, but I think it's a great platform, and they have such an extended library. It's not just HBO movies, which people think because the movie's HBO Max, but it's yeah.
All right, Maggie, anything you watched this week?
Right now I'm currently watching the Twilight series for the first time. First one was trash. It was so bad.
But beautiful trash.
Yeah. But the second one I actually really loved. But acting wise, I've, recently been watching Marvelous Miss Maisel, which has some of the best acting in TV that I've seen in a while that I've watched. No, I think
that's totally fair, especially for comedies.
Like Rachel Brosnahan, who plays the main woman, is like phenomenal, and also the writing is just hilarious. So I definitely suggest you check that out. Okay, so that wraps up our first episode of Got It. Yay! You can find me, Maggie Berry, on Instagram at Magnificent7. You're gonna write magnificent with an S after the G and then a 7 at the end. Yeah. Take it away, Toby.
Thank you guys so much for listening. You can reach out to me with any questions on Instagram as well. My Instagram handle is Toby Romero. The last O in Romero is a 0. DM me if you have any filmmaking questions or anything. In terms of like filmmaking, I also have a TikTok called Cine Hacks. Cine is CINE, and then hacks like computer hacking. And I post frequently, daily there, with tips and tricks and different kind of techniques to learn filmmaking.
Oh my gosh, I'm sitting with 2 micro influencers. I'm so honored.
And once again, I'm Emilio Miguel Torres. I'm Emilio Films on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. My website's called Emilio Films. Reach out if you have questions, curious. Hope you enjoy this podcast. And I thank Toby for organizing all this. It's really cool. And I'm really excited to just have discussions about filmmaking with Toby, and then, sometimes Maggie when she can make it.
work.
Yeah. And I mean, also reach out to us with questions as well. Like we're happy to discuss things on the podcast. So yeah, I mean, we'll hopefully set something up where a more formal way to ask, but for now, you know, just DM one of us, be like, hey, I, you know, was listening to Got It, loved it. Hopefully you loved it.
Best podcast ever.
Yeah. But seriously, please don't hesitate to ask any question. No question is dumb. And I mean, it's fun for us to, you know, reminisce a little bit and talk about things. And while we might not know the most, at least we're, you know, getting there. And I think that's kind of our hope with this podcast as well, is it's kind of discussing the process and learning from mistakes, but also, you know, hoping to kind of reflect on our past to provide insight to other people that may follow or are following in the same footsteps.